In the quiet town of Silver Creek, Sheriff Carter Wells believed he knew who to trust. But one cold night, as he slid into his car, a child's whisper shattered everything. "They're planning to take you down." From that moment, nothing was the same. The friends he leaned on were plotting his downfall, and the truth came not from his badge, but from a little girl hiding in the back seat, and a blind dog whose instincts could see deeper than any eyes. This is a story of betrayal, faith, and the miracle of finding family in the unlikeliest of places. Winter sat heavy on Silver Creek, Montana, the kind of clean, cutting cold that made streetlights bloom into halos and turned every exhale into a small ghost, floating off into the dark. The police department's brick building kept its heat like an old stove, humming behind frosted windows, while the lot outside lay slick with a skin of black ice and a dusting of powder that squeaked under boots. Sheriff Carter Wells crossed that lot with the steady gait of a man who had learned to walk through storms without advertising the effort. He was 48, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair salted at the temples and the posture of someone built from straight lines and oaths. A midnight blue sheriff's jacket hugged his frame, the gold star pinned over his heart, catching and returning a stray strand of sodium light. Scuffed jeans and broken-in leather boots completed the uniform of a Western lawman who preferred utility over ceremony. Carter's face was weathered in a pleasing way, creases from sun, wind, and too many long shifts, but his eyes stayed quick and level, the kind of quiet brown that had watched a town grow older and had not looked away when it hurt. Near his side, Blaze walked with him, his German shepherd partner of 7 years. Blaze was a big dog, sable and tan fur, thick as a winter pelt, muscles strong but slowed by blindness. His eyes were long since clouded to pale marbles, now hidden under a neatly knotted white cloth blindfold. Yet blindness had sharpened everything else, every vibration in the ground, every hint of scent in the wind. As they passed the entrance to the station, Blaze suddenly froze. His head lifted, nose twitching, ears pricked. The dog let out a quiet, uneasy rumble. From the building came a scent that didn't belong, too sharp, too metallic, tinged with anxiety. "A stranger's scent," Blaze seemed to say without words. Carter glanced back at the double doors, but saw nothing unusual, only the echo of his own suspicion. They reached the patrol car. Blaze climbed in first, settling on the backseat floor. Inside, he turned his head toward the far corner. His nose caught something new, different from the lingering soap of janitors and the faint grease of seat leather. It was the scent of another heartbeat. A child's. Blaze did not bark. He did not bare his teeth. He sniffed once, then lay down with a sigh. Whatever it was in the dark corner, it carried no threat, no malice, no scent of blood, no kill smell. For a dog who had walked battlefields of the street, that was enough. Carter opened the driver's door and slid into the seat. Before the key touched the ignition, a small voice cut the silence. "Shut up. Don't say a word." Carter's hands stilled. His gaze shot to the mirror. In the dim yellow spill of the parking lot lamps, a little girl revealed herself. About 7 years old, black, small, and wiry, with a face sharper from hunger than years. Her wide eyes glistened, intelligent but afraid, a look of someone too young to have carried so much already. Her hair curled in uneven strands, and her sweater sagged at the shoulders, frayed at the cuffs. This was Jasmine Reed. She was hiding in the patrol car, and Blaze had already judged her presence harmless. "Don't turn, just listen," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her words did not. "They're listening. Deputy Mark and Linda. They said tomorrow you won't own anything anymore. They said you'll sign, and then it will all fall on you." The names hit Carter like the bite of cold steel. Deputy Mark Thompson, early 40s, athletic, dark hair trimmed neat, famous for his town hall smile and for shaking hands like he meant it. And Linda Graves, the office manager, late 30s, efficient as a ledger, with blonde hair pinned tight and a talent for sealing every detail in tidy envelopes. Jasmine leaned closer from the shadows. "They laughed at you, said you follow orders like a dog, that after tomorrow you'll be out. They already have friends ready to say it was all your fault." Carter inhaled slowly, his chest tight. For weeks he had felt the tug of something wrong. Urgent memos, inventories that changed overnight, papers stacked on his desk with sticky notes saying only sign here. He hadn't voiced it, not yet. And now this child was naming it aloud. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Jasmine," she said, her chin lifting despite her fear. "And you're Sheriff Wells." They said it so many times. They said you were too tired to fight back. Carter's gaze flicked to Blaze. The shepherd lay stretched across the floor, his head tilted toward Jasmine, blindfold gleaming faintly white. The dog gave a small grunt, then stilled again, as if to say, "She's not danger. The danger is out there." "Why tell me this?" Carter pressed. Jasmine's eyes hardened with the kind of wisdom no child should need. "Because I know what it's like when people think you don't matter, when they talk like you're not even in the room. My grandma said, if you see someone being stepped on and you can help, you help. Because next time, it could be you." Blaze shifted, ears twitching. His nose pointed back toward the building, as though the lies and plots inside still leaked their stink into the air. A ripple of tension rolled down his back, then eased as he lowered his head to his paws. Carter gripped the wheel, a small smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. Not of amusement, but of resolve. "All right," he said finally. His voice was steel wrapped in calm. "You told me. That matters. You're safe in this car. No one will hurt you here." Jasmine bit her lip. "Tomorrow, will they win?" The sheriff's smile sharpened. "Tomorrow starts with me reading what they put in front of me, and remembering my hand is my own." Snow began falling again, gentle flakes catching in the lamplight like ash. In reverse. The night seemed to hold its breath. Blaze let out a steady sigh, as though satisfied with the sheriff's answer. The dog, the girl, and the man sat together in the small circle of warmth as the engine turned over. Tomorrow was their enemy's plan. Tonight, it was theirs. The drive back to Carter Wells's house carried the sound of tires hissing over thin ice and the restless whisper of snow moving across the highway. The sheriff kept his eyes forward, his hands steady on the wheel, but his thoughts were a storm in themselves. The patrol car's heater hummed, blowing warm air over the windshield where flakes melted as soon as they touched. Behind him, Jasmine sat silent, her knees pulled to her chest, while Blaze sprawled across the seat, the blindfolded shepherd pressing close enough that the girl could feel the vibration of his breathing. Every now and then, Blaze lifted his head, nostrils flaring at the scents trapped inside the car. Carter wondered if the dog was memorizing Jasmine's smell, the way he had once memorized the smells of gun oil and criminals hiding in alleyways. The Wells home stood at the edge of Silver Creek, a modest wooden house with a pitched roof now capped in snow and a porch swing that had not moved since autumn. Its windows were lit in amber, a lantern against the cold Montana night. Inside, a girl waited, Emily Wells, 14, slender and tall for her age, her hair a deep chestnut tied back loosely with a blue ribbon. Her features held the soft curve of her late mother, but her eyes were sharper, suspicious, as if they had aged a little faster than the rest of her. Emily's life since her mother's passing had been shaped by absence, a father who returned home in uniform but seemed always preoccupied, and a house that echoed too loudly without laughter. She had grown into the habit of keeping her distance, retreating into books and notebooks as though paper might fill the gaps her father's silence left. Carter parked in the drive and glanced toward the porch light. He took in a breath, then turned to Jasmine. "You'll be safe here tonight. My daughter's inside. She's about your age, a little older." Jasmine's eyes flicked to the glowing windows and then back to the sheriff. She nodded, though her small fingers clutched tighter at the frayed hem of her sweater. Blaze leapt down first, landing with the weight of a creature still proud of his strength. He sniffed the ground, then waited as Carter opened the door for Jasmine. The girl hesitated before stepping onto the snow, but the dog nudged her calf gently, urging her forward. They crossed the porch together, and Carter opened the door. Inside, the warmth struck immediately, carrying with it the faint smells of wood smoke and cinnamon. Emily's doing. She sat at the kitchen table with a spread of homework before her, a pencil between her fingers, though her eyes lifted instantly when the door opened. She froze at the sight of the stranger, a little girl standing next to her father, and the familiar shape of Blaze close behind. "Dad?" Emily asked, her tone careful. "Who is this?" "This is Jasmine," Carter said, his voice steady but quieter than usual. "She needed a safe place tonight. Emily's gaze slid from the girl to the dog. Blaze, who normally ignored strangers unless they smelled of trouble, was pressed near Jasmine's leg, his blindfold gleaming in the light. Emily had grown up around Blaze and knew his habits. If he accepted Jasmine so easily, something about her must be true. She frowned but said nothing. Jasmine lowered her head, suddenly shy. I didn't mean to cause problems," she murmured. Her voice, fragile but honest, drew Emily's eyes back to her. The sheriff removed his jacket and hung it by the door, then moved toward the stove to set the kettle on. "Sit down, Jasmine. You can tell us what you told me." The girl perched on the edge of a chair, Blaze lying at her feet like a sentinel. Emily leaned forward, wary but curious, her pencil forgotten on the table. Jasmine began to recount the conversation she had overheard at the station, her words tumbling in bursts. She told of how Mark had said Carter would sign papers without reading them, how Linda had arranged for the meeting to move into his office, how the plan was to pin the blame for missing evidence and turn him into the scapegoat for a drug trafficking operation that stretched further than anyone could see. Her voice cracked as she repeated the mocking tone she had heard, how they called Carter obedient, tired, too blind with duty to fight back. Carter listened in silence, his jaw tight. Emily, though, felt something shift inside her. She had grown used to thinking her father was all work and no attention for her. But watching him stand so still, his face hardening with each word Jasmine spoke, she realized he was more than a man obsessed with duty. He was a man other people wanted to break because he mattered too much. When Jasmine finished, Blaze shifted, pressing his nose against her hand as though confirming her truth. Emily watched this, stunned. Blaze had never been gentle with new people. He barked at neighbors, growled at repairmen, even stiffened around Emily's classmates. But now he treated Jasmine as if she belonged, and that unsettled something in Emily's guarded heart. Her father broke the silence. "Emily," he said, turning toward his daughter, "you know Blaze better than anyone. He trusts her." Emily folded her arms, pretending to be unimpressed, but her eyes betrayed curiosity. "Maybe he knows more than you, Dad," she said softly. Carter almost smiled at that. "Maybe he does." The kettle whistled, and the sheriff poured hot chocolate into 3 mugs, setting them on the table. The steam rose in curls, warming the air between them. Jasmine cupped hers with both hands, grateful for the heat. Emily picked hers up slowly, watching the other girl, noticing the way her sweater hung loose, the way her fingers trembled not just from cold, but from exhaustion. For the first time in months, Emily felt a tug of something she hadn't recognized before, compassion mixed with kinship. She saw another child who knew what it meant to feel invisible. Blaze thumped his tail once, sensing the change. He laid his head across both girls' feet, binding them together in the simple way only a dog could. That night in Silver Creek, trust did not heal all at once, but it cracked open the door. Jasmine had risked herself to warn a man she didn't know, and Emily, who had been certain her father cared only for the badge, began to glimpse the truth. Behind the uniform was a man others feared enough to betray, and a father who, despite his silence, was fighting to protect more than just the law. And for the first time, the Wells home felt less like a house of distance and more like a place where something new, fragile, uncertain, but real, could grow. The next morning in Silver Creek dawned gray and restless, with low clouds dragging their bellies across the mountains, as though trying to scrape away the town beneath them. The streets glistened from a night of half-frozen rain, and the air carried that sharp metallic tang of winter that always set nerves on edge. Sheriff Carter Wells stood by the window of his modest kitchen, coffee cooling in his hand, while his mind worked in circles. The betrayal of his deputy and his office manager was no longer rumor. Jasmine's words from the night before were too detailed, too precise, and the child's haunted eyes carried a weight beyond invention. Emily sat silently at the table, stirring her oatmeal, but eating little, her gaze often drifting toward Jasmine, who sat bundled in one of Emily's spare sweaters. Blaze lay between them, his large form taking up nearly the whole strip of rug by the table, ears twitching whenever the house creaked. Jasmine broke the silence first. "I know a place," she said quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of the bowl. "An alley where I hid before. They go there to talk because they think no one listens. You could hear for yourself." Carter studied her face, the too old seriousness, the fragile resolve, and nodded. It was risky, but sometimes proof needed to be caught with your own ears. By late afternoon, the three of them set out. The alley Jasmine spoke of lay behind a shuttered laundromat, the walls scabbed with old paint and rusted vents, trash cans pressed into corners where shadows pooled even in daylight. Carter kept his coat collar turned high, the brim of his hat low, while Blaze padded ahead, blind but moving, with the confidence of one who read the ground through vibration and air currents. Jasmine led them with the instinct of a child who had memorized hiding spots out of necessity. They crouched behind a sagging fence that gave a view toward the mouth of the alley. Carter could feel Blaze stiffen beside him, the shepherd's head lifted, ears canted forward like two cups tuned to an unseen frequency. A moment later, footsteps echoed, deliberate, measured. Blaze's throat rumbled, not in attack but in warning, the deep resonance of recognition. Carter's stomach tightened. He knew that sound. His dog was telling him. This was someone familiar, someone close. Mark Thompson entered the alley first, tall and trim in his dark wool coat, his stride carrying that same athletic crispness he always showed at town events. Behind him came Linda Graves, her hair pinned in a precise knot, clipboard tucked under one arm, her heels clicking smartly against the wet pavement despite the weather. They stopped near a dumpster, and Carter caught fragments of their voices. "Tomorrow's the day," Mark said, his tone almost cheerful. "Once he signs, it's all his, no way out." Linda adjusted her clipboard. "We've prepared the statements. The inventory lists already line up. All it needs is his." Name Mark gave a dry chuckle. "He trusts me, always has. Poor bastard still thinks I'm his right hand." Carter closed his eyes briefly, the words slicing deeper than he wanted to admit. Mark had been like a younger brother to him, loyal, eager, someone he had mentored. He had invited the man into his home for holidays, trusted him with shifts that mattered, even spoken of him with pride. Now that trust was nothing but kindling for betrayal. Blaze growled low, the sound vibrating against Carter's leg. The dog's ears pressed forward, every nerve recognizing Mark's step, the scent of his aftershave. Carter laid a calming hand on the shepherd's back, but did not quiet the growl. It was the sound of truth made flesh. Jasmine leaned close, whispering, "See? I told you." Her small hand clenched the hem of her borrowed sweater, knuckles pale with tension. They stayed long enough to hear Linda confirm that federal inspectors would arrive by 9 the next morning, and that the forged files were already planted in Carter's office. Then the two conspirators walked out of the alley, their figures disappearing into the early dusk, unaware of the witnesses hidden only a few feet away. When the silence returned, Carter exhaled slowly, his breath clouding in the cold. "I heard enough," he said, voice low. "Enough to know exactly who my enemies are." That night, back at the house, Emily searched through an old cedar chest in the attic. She brought down a small box of photographs, her hands brushing dust from the lids as she sat on the living room floor. Jasmine joined her, curiosity bright in her eyes. Emily pulled out one picture after another, her mother smiling at a picnic, her parents standing arm in arm in front of the sheriff's truck, herself as a child, with ribbons in her hair, laughing into her mother's embrace. Emily's voice was quieter than usual when she said, "I don't show these to people. It hurts too much." She held up a photograph of her father in uniform, her mother at his side. "She's gone, and sometimes I'm scared he'll disappear too. He's always so far away, even when he's here. What if one day he doesn't come back?" Jasmine listened, her own eyes growing wet. She touched the photograph gently. "I know what that feels like," she whispered. "My parents. They were gone before I understood what parents were supposed to be. My grandma raised me, but then she passed, and I've been alone since. I thought everyone disappears eventually." The two girls sat in silence, the distance between them closing in the shared language of loss. Blaze wandered over, blind eyes hidden behind his white cloth, and settled between them, resting his heavy head across both their laps. Emily stroked his fur slowly, Jasmine following his breathing with her own. The room grew warm, not just from the fire in the stove, but from the fragile bond forming in the quiet. For Emily, the fear of losing her father was a shadow she had carried in silence. For Jasmine, the fear had already come true too many times. Together, they began to understand that while loss left scars, it also made space for connection. And in that moment, in a small Montana living room, lit by lamplight and memory, two girls who had both known abandonment found something that might grow into family. The wind carried a harsher edge that night over Silver Creek, bending the pines until they whispered like old conspirators. Sheriff Carter Wells stood in the quiet of his study, the yellow lamplight casting his shadow long across the walls lined with law books and old photographs. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the phone in his hand. There was one man he could call, though pride and the bitterness of the past made it feel like swallowing gravel. Finally, he dialed. The line clicked, and a familiar gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Ross here. Gabriel, it's Carter Wells." There was a pause, followed by a low whistle. Gabriel Ross had once been a federal agent, now 45, his body lean and wiry from years of chasing shadows. He had the look of a man carved from stone, short-cropped black hair streaked with iron, and eyes the color of steel that seemed to weigh everyone he met. Known for being thorough to the point of obsession, Gabriel had once been Carter's strongest ally until politics and budget cuts forced him out. That dismissal, engineered partly by Linda's paperwork and Mark's persuasion, had left a raw scar in Gabriel's pride. "Well, I'll be damned," Gabriel said, voice dry but not unkind. "Thought you'd never call me again. Let me guess. It's about Thompson." Carter explained in tight, deliberate sentences the betrayal, the planned signatures, the drug trafficking cover. Silence stretched, then Gabriel's laugh came, humorless. I knew that slick smile of his hid rot. "You're late to the party, Wells, but not too late. I'll be there by morning." With that, the plan began. They would let Mark and Linda believe their scheme was intact. Carter would play the weary sheriff, leaning on his trust. At the meeting, he would sign where they told him, pretending ignorance. Meanwhile, Jasmine, with her size, sharp instincts, and courage, would hide nearby with a recorder. Her role was dangerous but critical, capturing their words when arrogance would make them careless. Blaze, ever silent, would stay at Carter's side, a watchful shadow. The night stretched on as they whispered strategy over Carter's desk, Emily listening from the doorway. Her arms folded, she frowned when she heard Jasmine would be involved. "She's just a kid, Dad," she said. "This isn't fair." Jasmine lifted her chin. "I already started this. I can finish it. They don't even notice me. People never do. That's why I hear things no one else hears." Emily looked at her for a long moment, then turned away, fear twisting into reluctant respect. The next day dawned brittle and bright, the snow reflecting too much light into tired eyes. Emily, restless from the tension in the house, decided to clear her head in the yard. She tugged on her coat and stepped outside, Blaze padding after her. Though blind, the German shepherd followed with the grace of long practice, nose low, ears swiveling, white cloth blindfold stark against his dark fur. Across the street, a car idled where it didn't belong. Behind the wheel sat Linda Graves, her blonde hair neat, face composed in its usual mask of efficiency. But her eyes carried calculation. And when she eased her car forward, the movement was too deliberate. Emily bent to tie her bootlace near the drive, unaware. Blaze's head shot up, his ears taut, his nose quivering. He felt the vibration of the engine before Emily heard it. The shepherd lunged, grabbing the girl's coat in his teeth and yanking her backwards so hard she fell into the snow. The car skimmed where she had been a heartbeat before, Linda's face a pale flash in the window before the vehicle sped off down the street. Emily sat stunned, snow clinging to her hair. Blaze stood over her, chest heaving, the faintest growl still trembling in his throat. She wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, tears breaking loose as relief flooded in. "You saved me," she whispered, voice muffled in his fur. For the first time, every wall she had built against trusting him, against trusting anyone but herself, crumbled. Blaze, blind and scarred, had become her protector. Inside, Carter stormed onto the porch at the sound of tires skidding, gun at his hip. But the car was already gone. Emily met his eyes with a steadiness he had not seen in years. "It was Linda," she said simply. "She tried to hit me. Blaze knew." Carter's chest tightened. His daughter's words carried no anger, only truth, and beneath it, the birth of trust he thought he had lost. He laid a hand on her shoulder and another on the shepherd's massive head. "We're all in this together now," he said. That evening, Gabriel Ross arrived, trench coat dusted with snow, leather satchel slung at his side. He studied the family gathered in the warm glow of the living room, the weary sheriff, the guarded daughter, the fierce little girl in a borrowed sweater, and the blind dog lying like a sentinel at their feet. His sharp eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "Well," Gabriel said, voice dry, "looks like we're building an army out of broken pieces. Sometimes those are the sharpest." They spent the night finalizing the plan, every detail laid out with Gabriel's meticulous hand. Carter would act the fool, Jasmine would record, and Blaze would sense danger when eyes could not. Emily sat close, still shaken but now certain. This was more than her father's battle. It was theirs. Tomorrow the trap would spring, but not the way Mark and Linda had imagined. The federal building in downtown Silver Creek loomed like a block of stone against the winter sky. Its windows gleamed under pale daylight, the flag at its mast stiff from the north wind. Inside, the conference room had been dressed for formality. A long, polished table, leather chairs, the faint hum of overhead lights, and folders stacked neatly at each setting. The air carried the scent of paper, coffee, and quiet anticipation. Sheriff Carter Wells entered in his dark uniform, his posture steady, his face a mask of calm forged through long years of storms. His daughter Emily walked behind him, shoulders squared with new determination, while Blaze padded at his side, blind eyes hidden behind his white cloth. The German shepherd's ears rotated with precision, capturing every shuffle and breath, his body humming with alertness. Mark Thompson was already seated, immaculate in a tailored suit rather than his deputy's uniform, the sheen of his tie gleaming too brightly under the light. His confident smile widened when he saw Carter. Linda Graves sat beside him, hair pinned into a perfect knot, clipboard balanced on her lap. Her movements were as efficient as ever, yet her eyes gleamed with the sharpness of someone certain they had already won. "Sheriff," Mark said warmly, rising to shake his hand. "Glad you could make it. Today's the day we secure the future of Silver Creek." His voice held that old brotherly charm, the same tone Carter once trusted. Carter shook the hand, his grip firm but cold. "Let's get to it," he said simply, lowering himself into the chair at the head of the table. Emily slipped into a chair at the far side, folding her hands tightly in her lap. Blaze lay at her feet, a silent anchor. Linda pushed a folder toward Carter. "Here are the contracts. The federal partners expect your signature before noon." She tapped the papers as though presenting a gift, her smile carefully composed. Carter leafed through them slowly, his eyes seemingly tired, exactly as they hoped. "All looks in order," he murmured. Mark leaned back, smug. "Of course it does. You've got us looking out for you, like always." Carter picked up the pen. The room hushed, anticipation filling the silence. Then the door at the far end swung open. Gabriel Ross entered, trench coat draped over one arm, his eyes like cold iron. Behind him came two federal officers in plain suits, their badges flashing as the light caught them. Their presence froze Mark's smile into a brittle mask. "Excuse me," Gabriel said calmly. "Before any signing takes place, we have evidence to present." He opened his satchel, pulling out folders thick with printed transfers, emails, and accounts. 2 years' worth of siphoned funds, shell companies, fraudulent ledgers, all directed by Mark Thompson and Linda Graves. He placed the files in front of the officers, who began leafing through them with grim efficiency. Linda's face blanched, but she forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous! None of this will hold up." Before Gabriel could reply, a soft voice cut through the tension. "It will hold up." From the far corner of the room, Jasmine Reed stepped out. She was small, almost swallowed by the oversized sweater she wore, but her eyes were steady, her hands gripping a cell phone. "I recorded what you said," she told Mark and Linda. "Last night, in the alley, about Sheriff Wells signing away his future, about how you were going to blame him." She tapped the phone, and the room filled with their voices, Mark's confident chuckle, Linda's precise words, the cruel certainty of their plot. The blood drained from Mark's face. He shot to his feet, fists clenched. That recording's illegal. She's just a kid. Carter rose as well, his voice low but thunderous. She's a child who told the truth when grown men lied. That's more law than you'll ever understand. Blaze growled deep, head lifted, the sound vibrating through the room like a drum beat. His blind eyes could not see, but his body knew betrayal when it stood in front of him. The federal officers closed in. "Mark Thompson, Linda Graves," one intoned. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of office." They cuffed them with the crisp efficiency of men who had done this 100 times. Linda wilted in her chair, her voice dissolving into denials, while Mark raged, his shouts echoing until the door shut behind him. Silence followed, heavy but clean, like the air after a storm. Carter exhaled, his shoulders loosening for the first time in weeks. Emily rose from her chair, hurrying to Blaze. She wrapped her arms around the shepherd's thick neck and whispered, "You kept us safe." "Your family." Blaze sighed, pressing his head against her chest, the white cloth blindfold catching the light like a banner of loyalty. Jasmine stood awkwardly near the wall until Carter walked over, crouching to her height. His eyes, once weighed by suspicion, now brimmed with something softer. "You saved me, Jasmine. You saved this whole town. No child should have to carry that alone." He rested a hand gently on her shoulder. "If you'll let me, I'd like to give you a home, not just tonight, not just until the trial. For good." Jasmine's lip trembled, but her eyes shone. "A real home?" she whispered. "A real home," Carter confirmed. Emily stepped forward, smiling shyly. "A sister," she added. Blaze wagged his tail, slow and steady, as if sealing the vow. Later that evening, as snow began to fall in thick, forgiving flakes, the Wells family sat together in their living room. Gabriel lingered in the doorway, the faintest trace of a smile on his hard features. "Justice," he murmured, "and something better." Carter looked at his daughter, his new child, and the blind dog stretched across the hearth, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. Blaze, though sightless, had seen what none of them could: truth, loyalty, and the invisible bonds that made them a family. Outside, the world was still cold, still uncertain, but inside, warmth and love triumphed. Justice had been served, and a family had been born anew. In the end, the story of Sheriff Carter, little Jasmine, Emily, and the blind shepherd Blaze reminds us that even in the darkest nights, God places unexpected lights in our path. Sometimes those lights do not come in grand miracles, but in the quiet bravery of a child, the loyalty of a dog who cannot see yet senses truth, and the second chances that only love can give. This tale is more than justice in a courtroom. It is a reminder that God's hand works in mysterious ways, guiding broken pieces into becoming a family, and turning betrayal into a testimony of faith, courage, and grace. Just as Carter found hope when he thought all was lost, we too can discover that God never abandons us, even when life feels heavy. In our daily lives, it may be the kindness of a stranger, the wisdom of a child, or even the silent protection of a loyal friend that becomes the miracle we need. Trust that these are not accidents, they are reminders that heaven still watches over us. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, tell us what you learned, and subscribe so you can hear more stories of hope, redemption, and love. And if you believe that God still works wonders through the most unlikely people, type Amen in the comments as a prayer for blessings over your life and the lives of everyone who listens. May the Lord bless and keep you always.